Good afternoon, everyone. This is Celeste Carmichael, Program Development and Accountability Specialist with Cooperative Extension Administration, and I want to welcome you to the last of our series of Campus County Connection webinars for the spring here. We're going to take a hiatus after this until September. We're very excited to welcome Rebecca Segrin and Ursula, I'm going to say your last name wrong.
Sriram.
Sriram. Okay, thank you. We're very excited to have them here today to talk about Heart Clubs, encouraging healthy eating and activity in rural towns. We are recording this webinar, just so you know, and it will be, I'll show you at the end of the webinar where you can find that on the staff pages for Cooperative Extension Administration, so it will remain there. But we hope that you'll join us, be with us today, and ask some good questions, because these things are much more interesting when everybody stays involved. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Let's see.
I'm not advancing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So this is Rebecca Segrin, and I'm here with Ursula today to present our work on the Heart Club project. And as Celeste said, the project HEART stands for Encouraging Healthy Eating and Activity in Rural Towns. And let's see if I can get the slides to.
Is it going to go forward for you?
No, I don't think so.
Let's try it again.
We're working on some technology on this end. Oh, looks like we're back in action. Okay, so just a bit of an overview of what we plan to talk about today. We'll do just a really brief background related to civic engagement specifically, and then talk to you a bit about the pilot project that informed our current Heart Club work. Then we'd really like for you to hear about the Heart Clubs. There are 4 Heart Clubs for this project, and for you to hear about what they're doing, and specifically we'll have some leader perspective from the Heart Club, and then talk to you about the long-term vision for this project and this work in general, civic engagement work.
I think because I was messing around with a poll, I must have messed that up too. But if you haven't noticed, folks that are on, I did put up a little poll just asking a little bit about your background, so different titles and also programmatic work that you're doing. I thought that might be helpful for Rebecca and Ursula to know who's on today. So you got a couple of minutes to do that, and I will help you move forward here. There we go.
Okay, so some background for you. Advance. Okay, so we wanted to actually start with a question. So in addition to the poll you have in front of you, it would be great to hear from some of you about what civic engagement means to you. How do you define civic engagement, and how do you think about it?
So if you can take a minute and add to the chat what civic engagement means to you, that would be great. Right, and while they're doing that, I'm going to go back to the poll and see who we have on board. So it's going to take a second to close that down. If you're in the middle of the poll, you have a second more, 9 seconds left. All right, and let me share those results with you here so you can see who we have. We have a number of program staff educators, a couple of association directors, some admin staff, community partners, and others, with most of the staff on representing food and nutrition, some community development, family and youth development, so a broad range, which is pretty typical for these Campus County Connection webinars. Thank you, guys. So it looks like you have some responses to.
Can everybody see the responses, or just us?
Well, they should be able to see them. Let's see if we have a privilege problem here.
Anything?
Oh, I see, because we're in the Q&A. We need to be in the chat. There we go. Everybody should be able to see what's in the chat here.
Okay. So getting the community involved in a project, finding ways for the general population to learn and positively interact with the community, identifying issues in the community and working together to address them, getting involved in your community with topics related to bettering the community. So I think that these are all really positive, strong perspectives and ways that we are trying to focus the work that we're doing with the Heart Club. So thank you all for your answers. That's really helpful. Okay, so we can move on. So here's one definition, but I actually prefer several of the definitions that you all gave better than this even, but collective actions designed to identify and address issues of public concern. But I like the use of language and bettering the community, and that perspective is really what we're trying to do. And one of the reasons that we have been taking this approach in this project and others that we're doing is because we believe that it could be a very valuable approach to changing aspects of the built environment, specifically the food and physical activity environments, to improve general health and well-being in communities. So that's sort of the framing for this. So I just wanted to define a little bit about what I'm talking about when I say the food environment. I think people are also confused sometimes when we talk about food systems. And so food environment can include, it's basically anywhere you are going to get food, potentially be eating food. It could include everything from supermarkets, corner stores, and farmers markets. But we also think about your home food environment. Your work environment is a place where you commonly eat and would be exposed to food. So for example, if you were to think about a policy in your workplace related to events and gatherings, and you wanted to have a healthy food policy in your workplace, that would also be a place that you could think about food environment touching. And then next slide. So physical activity environment, we think about the term the built environment is commonly used to describe what we're thinking about in terms of the physical activity environment for this. And this is really about particularly about man-made aspects of your environment that influence physical activity behavior. So not just thinking about formal exercise, but just in general, can you walk from place to place? Are there sidewalks and crosswalks and proper lighting and things of that nature? It can also include formal things like playgrounds and rec centers, but think about when you walk out your front door, what do you see in front of you, and is it conducive to walking to get to destinations as a really good example, or in your downtown area, in your neighborhood, or in your community, in the city that you live in, is it conducive to walking from point A to point B? Sometimes people realize that they're in an area that they don't want to walk in, but they're not really sure why, and often that has to do with traffic. So for example, if you think about a road with 2 lanes of traffic on both sides, so a total 4-lane road where the traffic, the speed limit might be 50 miles per hour with street lights and with traffic signals rather, and do you want to walk along that road even if there's a sidewalk? Well, it can actually be much more pleasant if there's, for example, a grass barrier between the road and the sidewalk, so that there's actually a barrier, or even parking. So if there's cars parked between you where you're walking and the road itself, people will feel more safe walking in that environment. If it's well lit, if there are benches, if there's shading, if there's flowers. So there are all these little things in an area that you might want to walk in, either for exercise or transportation walking to get groceries or post office. And so thinking about those features which don't necessarily jump out at you as you don't necessarily know why you don't want to walk there or why you do, but bringing some attention to that, and that we actually can, in some cases, make some real change in the physical activity environment that makes it more conducive to being active. So a little bit of background on the built environment. Next slide. Okay, so the idea of this project, the Heart Club, and the general civic engagement and changing food and physical activity environments for the better through this process is really around envisioning and creating communities where people are naturally more active on a daily basis, again, both through active transport opportunities and also recreational physical activity, and that they also have access to healthy foods. And when we think about access, we think about it in a few different ways, but there's physical access, and then there's often financial access to food. So there may be really great, beautiful fruits and vegetables and foods around you, but can you financially access that produce, as just an example? And then physical access might be, is it there in your community? Do you have a vehicle to get to it? You know, what stores are available, et cetera. So there are different aspects of food access, but that's what we're trying to address. And of course, we want people to have access to healthy foods, and that's an additional layer in terms of general food access. Slide. Okay, so a little bit about the pilot project, which this is called the Change Club project. Let's see if this is, oh, now it's going. Okay, great. So the Change Club project, this was a community-based participatory research informed approach. So it's not a traditional CBPR project in that the communities didn't solely come up with their own idea. The idea was really framed around food and physical activity environment change through a civic engagement approach. So that was the premise of it, but within those topic areas, they had complete autonomy to choose what they wanted to work on, which is sort of the CBPR informed approach that we're talking about. So the overall steps to that project was local leadership identification, and we have been working since around 2003 with cooperative extension educators across the country for, so at that point, almost a decade, and we had some really strong leaders that we were working with in community programs, physical activity and nutrition programming for a long time, and so we contacted them and sort of talked with them about the vision for this project to get them engaged. And then another step of this was really around capacity building with the educators, a civic engagement and empowerment approach where they worked with residents in their community to bring them together. So they bring them together. This is step 3 with idea generation, collaboration, and action planning, and we'll get more into the details of this. This is just meant to be an overview, and that these pieces all come together to create positive community change through this local leadership, civic engagement, idea generation, et cetera. So these are the communities that we ultimately ended up working with. We were aiming to work in predominantly rural communities, but I have to just say that we ended up in Fort Collins in Colorado. We had really strong leadership and partnership in Colorado with Extension, but the community we were supposed to work in, which was a very rural community, had some issues close to the last minute, and we needed to find an alternate community. So Fort Collins, as all of you know, is not a rural community, but we decided, given the leadership and partnership we had in Colorado, to go ahead and stick with working with them. So we did. They were our sort of outlier in terms of population size. So we worked in 8 states: Alaska, Colorado, Montana, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, Wisconsin, and finished in Pennsylvania. And we actually, we flew from Seattle to Kenai to do this work, and then we flew back to Seattle, and then we drove along the starred route that you see here. So it was about a 3-month trip in total.
Wow.
Where we went to all the communities to facilitate this work.
So I'm going to can I just step back and ask a question?
Yeah.
And you may have covered this, and I may not have just, I may not have been right on board there. But this is a big national project. Sorry, do you have other partners across the country that are collaborating on this?
So these Change Clubs, so we're called Change Clubs, not Heart Clubs. Many of them are still engaged in what they're doing. So these are meant to be long-term sustainable projects. Some of them have a distinct end and beginning of a project component or a goal, but then they'll often come up with a new thing. So as an example, one community was working on making the healthy choice the easy choice in terms of food choice in their community. So that's where they started, and they really wanted to focus on food in the community. It was in Choteau, Montana, which has about 1,000 people. And then the community may move on and say, okay, we did a food thing, now we're actually going to do a physical activity thing and move on to have a new thing that they're doing. Sometimes there's turnover with the residents who are engaged, and that's fine. I could talk with people more about, we set up a charter for sort of how the resident groups come together and work, but Yeah, so.
And were the land grants in those states, were they involved in helping?
These are all extension-based partnerships. They are.
Super.
And we hope to have other types of partnerships. So, for example, we are just starting to work with Bassett Healthcare System on part of an intervention, and 2 communities actually in New York through Bassett will have heart clubs as part of a larger study. And so the idea is to branch out and continue certainly to work with Extension, because they're my favorite partner to work with, but to continue to broaden that. And in fact, Bassett will work in partnership with Extension too. So it'll be Bassett as the healthcare system, but then working with Extension as well. We can talk more about that. But so these are ongoing, and then this project I'm talking about today is 2 in New York and 2 in Pennsylvania. And then there will be heart clubs. Ultimately, there are 12 communities in a new Montana study, but there will be 6 of them will also have heart clubs in that Montana study. So yeah, it's continuing to grow, and hopefully we'll expand further. So, and then we'll talk about that at the very end, expansion plans. So, okay. So in terms of what we did in this project, again, this was a pilot, and we had an idea of what we wanted to do. We had these leaders we wanted to engage. We knew that they were really good at engaging participants in programs, and therefore we thought they would do a really great job with engaging residents in this kind of community change project. But we really didn't know what was going to happen or what they were going to do, and it turned out to be a really intensive process. We spent many weeks preparing them and working with them for our visit, and then we spent 3 days actually in the community working with them directly. So the residents that we worked with and the pilot actually they gave up, and most of them had full-time jobs. Some of them were retired teachers, et cetera, but they gave up 2 full days, like 8 to 5 days, and then there was a 3rd day where the leader had to spend the full day with us. So it's quite a big time commitment to get this all going. So first we had this engagement of the leader, then they formed this club. Essentially the leader brought these people together, and we had usually groups of 8 to 15 people who formed the Change Club. Part of our process with them that was very important was stakeholder engagement. So we had them make a list of stakeholders in the community that could potentially want to support or maybe oppose changes to the food or physical activity environment, so they were on the radar. And we also really encouraged them to think about people that they knew and had relationships with that they could engage depending on what they decided to work on. And then there was this environmental assessment, and you can see the picture just below on this slide. We're doing a walkabout, and this is in Brodheadsville. I led all of the walkabouts for the sites that I was at, and this is a really interesting one. So there's a school that we're walking through. This is a school parking lot, and the school is sort of in this pie. So there's a state highway on either side of the school complex, which had several schools within this sort of pie shape. And sandwiched between these 2 state highways where the speed limit was 50 or 55 miles per hour, and then those roads had very few, if any, sidewalks. McDonald's and other places, Taco Bell's, are just sort of on the other side of the schools, and then their community center, which was their library, is on the other side of the state highway, and then on the other side is a lot of residential areas. And the kids actually get driven to school because it's so dangerous for them.
Wow.
So where we're walking, you can see like the car, we should have blown this up bigger, but you can see there's no sidewalk for us to walk on, and we're just trying to get back to the library from the school. But you could imagine as a parent, you really wouldn't want your kid walking to school, even though it was 1/8 of a mile door to door from the house. So part of the walkabout in this community involved walking through the school, walking to the community center, and then seeing sort of the residences and the businesses in the area. But it's really around raising some awareness of what the assets and barriers might be in the community to walkability. Mm-hmm. We also do, part of their environmental assessment, we did grocery store visits and other things related to the food environment. So those are some of the components of that. And then based on the conversations they've had and idea generation, they come up with a noble purpose. And there's actually a noble purpose on the side here that's a little small for you to read, but it's to increase the physical activity in the community using the resources that we have with the goal of changing social norms around physical activity. And this is the noble purpose from Kenai. And what they found is that in their discussions, they found that they had a lot of things in the community that were just really underutilized, and that they didn't need to make a huge structural or programmatic or policy change. What they needed was to sort of get together as a group and bring all of the resources and ideas together of what already existed in the community, and then do a ton of promotion around that. So that like through events and flyers and other things that weren't being done, so highlighting trails that actually had really nice signage just weren't being used, a rec center that was highly underutilized. And there were some really interesting norms around active transport in this community. So if you were seen, for example, walking to the like with your grocery bags to or from the grocery store in a place that, you know, wasn't hugely walkable, but easily, like distance-wise, you could do, people thought that you either didn't have money for gas or that you had gotten a DUI. So there was just a lot of social sort of stigma around if you were seen walking for transportation walking purposes, that you must have no other choice, even if it was a lovely day in June in Alaska. So anyway, they wanted to do enough promotion such that those resources were being utilized, and also do enough so that people would be more keen on seeing people out walking. So that was what they were trying to work on. But it was all informed by the early work with the walkabout and community assessment and the discussions of stakeholders and what were they concerned about in their community that they came up with this. And then based on that, they developed benchmarks. So it's essentially a roadmap of what are we going to do and why are we going to do it, and then they have a plan to then monitor their action plan. So that's how it all comes together. Not clicking. That's because I... Give me a second here. There we go. Okay. So I've already given you some examples at this point, but I just wanted to share some examples. So one noble purpose is to improve the health and wellness of the community school children by, 1, increasing active transport to and from school, and then number 2 was implementing a healthy food environment policy. So that's a pretty big task to put in front of them. I will say that childhood obesity emerged as, even though these were mainly, I would say, most of our groups were women ages, I don't want to give a range because I'll leave somebody out, 30 to 90 was probably the age range, but mean age was probably in the late 50s or early 60s or so. And but childhood obesity was very much on people's minds, and they wanted to think about how to make the community healthier for kids. So that emerged as something that we didn't necessarily expect at all in this work, but that's what it was. So to support this, they developed a strategy, had an evaluation plan. They sort of laid the groundwork with their communication opportunities, rather. One of their key measures was to measure the number of children at baseline and then 6 months of follow-up of the number of children walking and biking to school, increasing knowledge about walk and bike programs and talking to parents related to that. And then they realized that in 6 months they could only do a limited amount of stuff, and this was already a lot. So they just wanted to assess the food environment in the school to understand if there were policies and what those looked like. For example, like bringing in snacks for birthday parties, and what did that look like. So they just wanted to do some assessment of that to start off with. This is another example. This is actually a kickoff event that we were there for. This is their Lamar Change Club 5K Walk Run event, and this, again, their community wanted to focus on getting families to be more active together. So their broader project was actually working on funding a large rec center, so they took on a huge task, but their kickoff event was related to physical activity, and this is us here. So on the final day of our work facilitating, so we did a lot of upfront work with them, and then we had this as their kickoff event. So I just wanted to show you that as an example. And then another example, example 3 here, to improve the community food environment at schools, public events, and other gatherings by making the healthy choice the easy choice. I think we're missing a couple of words, but basically this is a project that really aims, so small community, a ton of like football games and community events, the firefighters, they did a lot of their county fair, et cetera. So what they found overall, their concern is that all of the foods that were, most of the foods that were offered tended to be unhealthy, and they tended to be really cheap, and the healthier foods, if they were even available, were more expensive, but mainly they weren't available. So this is actually a list of just a few of the things that they were able to do during their time period, which is really, really impressive. So their stakeholder identification exercise was extremely important because they had to get a lot of people on board with doing this. So they were able to eliminate sugary beverage sales at 9 sales or distribution at more than 9 community events and locations regularly. They eliminated candy sale and options at other events. They did a ton of work around what can we make for sale items at community events that people will buy that would be healthier food options, so like zucchini bread or zucchini bars or things like that that they added. They did some price manipulations such that they had their healthy foods be really, really inexpensive. So one of the key things in this community is they said, absolutely not, we will get no buy-in, we'll get no partners if we take anything away in terms of like the foods at, the beverages I think were okay at certain things, but they couldn't take away the fried Twinkies or fried Snickers bar, things like that, that they were really concerned about taking things away. So they wanted to do a lot of adding and a lot of price changing such that they would encourage purchase of water and other things. But and then they did some really neat things. So they had an annual Easter egg hunt, and instead of giving out candy, they gave out things like coloring books and other non-food things for the kids. So they came up with an annual calendar of all the things going on in the community, and then they tried to target, which there's a lot for this tiny place, and so they then tried to target as many events as possible to try to change the food environment there. So they did a really incredible job with their project. Okay.
So this would be a good time if anyone has any questions. Feel free to chat them in, or I believe if you raise your hand, I can unmute you if you would like your voice heard, which is absolutely okay with us. So why don't you take a moment to think through some questions, and while you're thinking, one question that I had is, I think that was example number 3 is really interesting, particularly because they, I mean, it's really hard to change a fair environment or that festival environment. Did they come up with a list of things that worked that other counties or communities could learn from? Is that available anywhere?
As far as strategies that they use?
Or items that people, that were really very healthy items that people purchased,
Oh.
Was it the salad that worked over the...
I don't know, but it would be easy.
Fried Twinkie?
We're still really engaged with them, so it would be really easy to find out what their big sellers were, because I'm sure that they had things that totally flopped and that they got rid of, and things that they continue to do. I mean, I certainly know I know a lot about their process of how they, who they had to talk to and how they made those changes, and some of the challenges that they came up against in trying to make them. Overwhelmingly, they did, the people that started the club, the Change Club, and who were leading this charge are pretty, have strong personalities and know the community really well. So I think that their connections in the community helped them enormously. But I don't know about their big sellers or the things that really flopped in terms of what they added. So, yeah, that would be interesting to hear about.
And I think with so many cooperative extension offices being involved in events and activities, particularly fairs, I think they're and an interest in healthy foods and providing that environment for healthy options. Folks would certainly be interested.
You know, one thing they did was they universally increased prices for any sugar-sweetened beverage and made water really cheap. So I think that was a really successful process.
All right, so we have a question, and it is, what is the goal of the current Heart Club project? What additional information are you looking for that wasn't assessed during the Change Club road trip process?
Well, I'll let Arshila talk about the Heart Club project a little bit more. And so what was the second part? What are we assessing in this project that we didn't? Oh, I mean, so the big thing is that with the Change Club project, which was incredible and really fun to be a part of and really successful overall, very successful, is we can't do the level of facilitation that we did in the time that we did. Obviously, we can't travel to all the communities that we possibly want to do this in, which is probably almost every single one. So the Heart Club was really meant to take what we learned in terms of the approaches that worked, the curriculum that we used to refine the curriculum, and actually to take new extension partners who would essentially, we trained them in the process, but then to hand it over to them and let them do the facilitation, let them bring the residents together, let them facilitate the entire process. So essentially, they're taking over, I would say, you know, a large chunk, maybe 60% or more of what we did as the research team for the Change Club project, so that we could actually put this into more communities. So even though we're doing 4 communities in this project, again, what we're trying to do is put a lot of the work really into the hands of a local person, and then we just provide very sort of remote support throughout the process, whereas before, as I had mentioned, we spent a lot of intensive preparation time before the trip, and then during the trip, we spent 3 full days, and that's a huge commitment on the part of the residents to do, and we just didn't think that that would be possible to do on a broader scale. So the idea is to figure out a new model for capacity building with the educators, and then hopefully to learn from this project enough so we can take the next step forward and make sort of a curriculum and toolkit available so more communities can use this process to engage people.
Well, it sounds like a perfect connection for extension work. So with I moved forward, so
That's
you should
perfect.
be able to move forward with the clicker too.
Is there any funding? There was one question that just came in about funding.
Okay.
We can answer that one. I didn't see it disappeared too quickly for me to.
Okay. Is there any funding attached to pay for staff time?
So with this, it's actually interesting. In the Change Club project, there was not. This was all sort of, if they were able to do it as part of their work and extension and it worked for them, then that's how it worked out. So there wasn't any in the first project. In the Heart Club project with these 4 communities, there is support for staff time to be involved in the project and for the evaluation we're doing. I think in the long term, the vision is that it would fit within, sort of going back to what the Change Club did, that it would fit within hopefully what somebody, it aligned well with what somebody is doing within their work as it is, and that the Community Change Initiative, because the only way for this to be sustainable is if it does, I think, fit within the health educator, whoever that is, whether it's Extension or Bassett Health Educator, fit within a model of what they're supposed to be doing as part of their work. So
it's a good question, though.
Very good question.
We're always asking about funding.
Is there funding? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, so there is for the Heart Clubs, but I think moving forward, hopefully we can create a system that it would fit in.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your questions, and thank you, Rebecca, for that great intro into the Heart Club projects. And thanks for the question that just popped up, because I will talk about the towns that we're working with now as part of this Heart Club project. So,
Ursula, do you want to also just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, sure, I would love to. So I am a first-year doctoral student. I just finished my first year here in community nutrition, and I'm part of Rebecca's research group and very interested in community change initiatives and changes to both environments and this new model of civic engagement and capacity building. So this has been a great project for me to be involved in, and I've learned a lot in the process, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of that with all of you who are listening to the webinar today. So as Rebecca mentioned already, the difference with these Heart Clubs was really to build capacity of extension educators, so have them be the facilitators of this model that we had. And we were really focused on harnessing the collective power of community residents through the formation of these Heart Clubs. And the goal of the community residents and the extension educators were to work together to develop sustainable environmental changes in their food or physical activity environments. And so we have currently implemented the Heart Club curriculum in 4 rural communities, 2 in upstate New York, so that's in Herkimer County and in Schuyler County in New York, and we also have 2 communities in Pennsylvania as well. And the extension educators were asked to recruit interested residents to, as I mentioned before, address a specific issue in their community related to physical activity or to healthy eating. And similar to the Change Club approach, they were following a stepwise guide to develop and evaluate their group's goals. And in terms of the project timeline, it started in October 2013, and in the first year is when the curriculum was being developed, and we conducted a leader training session, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. And in the second year, communities really started to implement this work, so go through the curriculum, start identifying their projects and working towards them, and the current end date in terms of wrapping up evaluation of how effective their programs and their projects were will end in September of 2016. But it is, the goal was really to create a sustainable project, so that the end aim is to have these initiatives continue on, and we'd hope that our current Heart Clubs would continue to update us as they add more work in, and we'd love to keep in touch with them over time to see how things have gone, similar to the Change Clubs that Rebecca talked about as well. So breaking down our project timeline a little bit, we started with our leader training workshop, and that was in the summer of 2014. And these are just some pictures from that day. So it was a one-day workshop that we conducted here at Cornell, and the 4 educators did come down to participate, and so we just walked them through the curriculum. The picture at the top is them conducting their own walkabout, and they were using an electronic tablet-based tool to take pictures as they walked around. So I think we had a little route around our building in the agricultural quad here on campus, and they got to walk and identify some features of the physical activity or built environments that they noted. And then down below is us walking through some of the activities. And we did also have group cohesion activities that the leaders got to construct together, just so that they could get an idea of everything that they would be walking through with participants, but also introduce them to one another. And as this process has gone along, we've had monthly project calls so that the leaders could talk to one another and bounce ideas off and see how other groups were doing, and that would give them a great way, too, to problem solve any challenges that came up for their groups as well. So the next step was to recruit Heart Club members, which happened from right after the training up until the fall of 2014. And the aim was to recruit about 8 to 12 Heart Club members, and if it was a little bit smaller, which some groups ended up being, that would be okay. And we wanted both men and women, and as anyone over the age of 18, and so the age range for a lot of, for some of the groups was quite wide. One group managed to get quite a few college students involved in the process, which was really neat and brought in new perspectives, and other groups had older members that were part of their group, so it was interesting to see the diversity from group to group. And the aim was really to seek individuals who were already excited about making changes in the community, excited about sharing their knowledge about healthy living with other people, and willing to become advocates because they were proud of the area in which they live and they really wanted to see a change. And the third step was there were pre-meeting activities that they had to complete. And the first was just a baseline questionnaire, just asking the members a little bit more about themselves that they were able to fill out online. We did conduct an initial interview with our Heart Club leaders. So this was after the training, once they'd already recruited people, just to see how things had gone so far and get their feedback with the process. And we had members do an awareness activity, and I pulled up a couple of questions that I'll pose to the audience here today, and it was just asking people to evaluate their own communities from their perspective and think about, so the first one was, during a typical day, what makes it difficult for you to eat healthy food or be physically active? and what can be done to make it easier for both yourself, your family, and friends, as well as community members, to eat healthy or be active. So I'll take a couple of minutes to pause and see if anybody has any thoughts they'd like to chime in with, and then we'll share those with everybody else as well.
Okay, so if you want to chat in your responses, during a typical day, what makes it difficult for you to eat healthy food or be physically active, or they can respond to the second one as well, right? What can be done to make it easier for you, your family, friends, and community members to eat healthy or be active? Boy, work gets in the way. That's my first thought. So I do try to get out in the middle of the day and take a walk and just get some fresh air. All right.
I see some of the answers coming in are very interesting.
So keep responding, folks. There we go. Can you see those okay from where you are, Ursula?
Because, yeah, just see them like popping up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can. Well, we can go back to seeing it that way. That probably makes it a little easier. Okay. Any other responses?
Work.
Yeah.
No.
So as you've been doing this work with the Change Clubs and the Heart Clubs, I imagine that some of the follow-up work, as they gather these kinds of things like sidewalks and some of the things that are more policy and may require funding, there's probably interaction with community and government, local decision makers. And have you seen some success with making some changes?
Absolutely. In Kenai, they also engaged, so I had mentioned like they wanted to have the resources that they had be used, but they also, the mayor came to our Change Club, and they talked a lot about what they called the Bridge to Nowhere. This bridge that's called actually, so it's not the Bridge to Nowhere, it's the Disunity Bridge. It's actually called the Unity Bridge, but it connects two parts of the community, but you can't get over the bridge easily by foot or bike because of the traffic and there's no space, and it's a huge complaint in the community. So they are working, and we continue to get updates from Kenai, but they're working with the mayor as another part of what they're doing is their Change Club to actually get something done about that bridge, and so it's required a lot. But in Broadheadsville, where I was talking about the school, the PI, there's a lot of support to change that structure so that it would be more walkable, except there's a lot of pushback because they don't want to slow down traffic. And so that's sort of in the stakeholder process, you know, who are the people that stand to gain or lose. In general, it's easier to make physical activity environment change. There's usually fewer people, especially if you can get the money together. Food environment stuff can be a lot trickier to make change. And and the people that you get engaged are really different. But yeah, absolutely. That's why the stakeholder exercise is really important, so they can think about who do we know, who's going to be an enemy, who's going to be an ally in this process, and trying to anticipate what issues people may have with the change is really important. So, wow, these are really great.
Those are all great responses, and in terms of the current Heart Clubs as well, one of our leaders you'll get to hear from today, and their group has been really successful at engaging multiple community partners and in terms of their projects. So I'll leave it there for now so that I don't spoil what's coming, but you will hear more about that as well.
Before we close out of the chat, I just wanted to say that, you know, some of these are really, like the combination of answers that everybody gave is really helpful because some of them are very individually based, like how do I make change, you know, my maybe work constraints, that maybe is something that could be changed in the work environment, but, you know, sort of individual level. But a lot of these really are like food access, like access to healthy foods, and not having like things that are quick and convenient that are also healthy, better planning related to that, but then neighborhoods and sidewalks. And so this combination, and so this project really is, you know, what are the things that fall into a structural policy or programmatic change that can be made so that the entire community will benefit, or, you know, a big segment of the community will benefit from the change. I'm just realizing, did we end at 4?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Yes. So, and we have Linda for 5 minutes. Okay.
So thank you very much, everyone, for your feedback. As Rebecca said, it's great to see, and I think asking yourself these questions really does build awareness and help you identify issues, and in addition, so do objective assessment. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide.
There we go.
So the last pre-meeting activity we did was to conduct this community asset inventory, and it really, as it says, would just broadly capture the resources and facilities that exist in your community, things like sidewalks and bike lanes and community businesses, and provides an assessment of what exists and what doesn't. And so in that way, you discover the assets your community has, and whether it's just about publicizing and promoting those assets, and you identify areas for improvement. And so what Heart Club members did is they did both a windshield tour, which is just a driving tour, and a walking tour. So the walking tour started at the center of town. It was about a 1-mile walk where they could assess different features of their community, and the driving tour was just further outside the perimeter, so they could get more of a perspective of what actually existed. And I think for a lot of our groups, this is really helpful in helping them to identify issues, and I'll touch on that a little bit more as well. And then continuing along with the project timeline, groups started to conduct their curriculum meetings, and there were meetings 1 to 4, which you'll see in a second. And then in around May or June of 2015 is when a lot of groups were targeted to start their implementation of the projects they wanted. And then in October or December of this coming year is sort of our last follow-up with them to see how things have been going. And so the Heart Club curriculum was very similar to the Change Club curriculum, and they started with identifying an issue in their first meeting by discussing things that they had seen, by doing the community assessment, and also some of their pre-meeting questions that they had answered as well. And then they morphed that issue into a noble purpose, similar to what the Change Clubs had done. And then once they had a noble purpose that was either surrounding the food or physical activity environments, they just developed benchmarks. So that included the process of identifying stakeholders, setting up a plan for implementation, how they were going to monitor and evaluate their effects, their projects, and then later on planning for expansion. And under every benchmark, they developed an action plan just so that they could assign different tasks and roles to Heart Club members and set up a timeline for that. And that was really helpful for them in planning and getting things moving and going. And in the final meeting, they just developed a unified message. So in the process of engaging stakeholders and other community members, they just wanted a way to describe the work that they were doing. So they really outlined the what, where, when, why, and how of their project, and that was a great talking point as they continue to approach other people in their community. And so the 6-month follow-up we've completed in 3 communities right now. It was a group discussion with some of the Heart Club members to get their feedback on the process itself and the work that they had done in terms of their benchmarks, what they'd accomplished to date. We had a second interview with our leaders to see how they felt about the project at this point in terms of benchmark accomplishment, group dynamics, how their group really worked together after they recruited them and worked with them for 6 months, and then their next steps. And we're planning to do the same thing at the 12-month follow-up, which again falls between October and December of this year. So current progress, as I mentioned, was 3 out of 4 Heart Clubs have completed their baseline questionnaires. They've assessed, gone through the curriculum, had their group discussions. They also filled out a final questionnaire similar to the baseline, and we have conducted the first and second interviews with our leaders. And so I'll take a short pause here for any questions that audience members have, and then I'll move on to descriptions of our Heart Clubs themselves.
Why don't we ask if anybody has questions? Go ahead and chat them in, and we can keep moving, and I'll bring them up if I see some things.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay. So the most exciting part is always to see the communities themselves and who they were. So this is a really neat quote from our community out in Schuyler County, and this is part of their noble purpose, and they stated, each journey begins with the first step. Improve your personal wellness and come and take the first step with us. And so our leader out in Schuyler was Patty, and she was great, and their noble purpose was to encourage healthy living through increased physical activity for the community, and they wanted to do this by enhancing and improving the physical environment of a local trail. And this was something they knew existed, but they rediscovered during their community assessment. So that's why it was really important for them. They walked by and they said, hey, this actually does exist here, and it would be great, and maybe we could use this trail to promote ongoing community walking events, because a lot of people want to get out and walk, but they don't like doing it on their own. So this is a great way for them to get involved. And so they've conducted a couple of indoor walks during the winter that we had. It was not possible to be out on the trail, but they just had their first trail walk a couple weekends ago, and they have another one coming up this Sunday that I am hoping to attend as well. So it'll be great to go out there and do one of the walks with them. Our second community was out in Pennsylvania, and they also focused on physical activity, but again, through their community assessment, they discovered they had a lot of resources out there, and so they wanted to highlight what actually existed, very similar to one of the communities in Kenai out in Alaska, if I'm correct, Rebecca. And so they developed a brochure and also created a map, and to create this map, they got students at a local college involved within the graphic design department, and so they had a competition. About 5 or 6 students developed different versions of this map, and I have a picture up here with the final one that they selected, and so it was really neat. And a bigger version of this is going to go up in Borough Hall, and all of the other versions are also going to be put out on display to acknowledge the work of the students. And so community members have this as a resource, and if they visit all of the places on the map, they get a final stamp that says I did it and a little prize at the end. And so some of these things are only occurring in the fall, so they're hoping to monitor and implement and give out the prizes in October of this year. And then our third community out in Pennsylvania, they were focused more on the food environment, and they wanted to spread and increase the culture of healthy eating through classes and events. So they wanted to start with vegetable cooking demos and tastings at local venues over the summer. And this group is just getting started, so they're in the process of developing their plan. And they also wanted, thinking about sustainability, to provide booklets that people could take home. So when they visit these markets, they'll actually have something to take back that they can use year after year, and possibly making these cooking demos by partnering with farmers, something that can continue on as well. And then our last community, I'll skip the question break here, but I'll move right into where we have one of our leaders to talk about it. And our leader, this is the second community we have in New York, out in Herkimer, and our leader is Linda Robbins, and I'll just do a brief introduction to her community. But their idea was to increase physical activity year-round of all individuals in their community by building health and fitness stations at a local school playground. So the picture on your right is the location of these fitness centers they're going to build, and to your left is their fundraising banner. So this is the community that I mentioned earlier that has really engaged a lot of partners in the community, and they're in the process of fundraising to build these fitness stations. So I will let Linda take over here and talk about some of the accomplishments and challenges of the project and address any questions that our webinar participants will have.
So Linda, I have unmuted you. Hopefully.
Okay, can you hear me?
There we go, we can.
Yay.
Perfect.
Hi, Linda.
Excellent, okay. Thanks there, Sheila. And actually that's a village playground, not a school playground that we're working in. I think I can just say the accomplishments are we joined this project last October, so we're playing a little bit of catch-up. We did recruitment of our group, and we were able to pull from the Discovery Tool project that we worked with Rebecca on a year before that, which was also in the same community. Our demographics for that Discovery Tool piece were 65 65 and older. So I had retirees from that community that I went back to and recruited several of those to participate again in this project. And it was a beautiful connection because we identified issues already by trying this tablet project. And so we had some great folks involved, and they really have taken this to a higher level than I ever expected. We were actually doing our curriculum work in December. In January, we had scheduled, this was going to be a small project, working with a senior housing area that had a small park. And we were thinking maybe we could have 1 or 2 of these fitness stations there. We met with their board, got very negative response because we had actually one of our members of our Heart Club was part of it, and he thought it might work. That was a blessing in disguise at that point because we moved on. We'd already scheduled a meeting with the school board thinking, gee, this would be a great place to get people involved. And we'd also scheduled a meeting with the village board. Those meetings coming in the sequence they did opened up brand new doors. When we hit the village board, we had complete buy-in. They were excited about the project, said this has a lot of potential. They even made a resolution that night at that village board meeting. When we went to the school, we have a very active, involved community superintendent. And this person joined us, not as the Heart Club original group, but came on board as we moved this project through the village board process. And the people that we have, as I mentioned, if they weren't on a committee in this community, it didn't exist. They're on the Rotary, they're on the board, civic groups, everything, and they are involved. A lot of these were retirees, but since then we've involved some other players that are not, a personal trainer, the school superintendent, other village board trustees, the DPW superintendent joined us, the fire department got involved, and we have some other civic groups. As we move this forward, I would say some of our accomplishments have been moving from that small little project to say how can we do this maybe around the community to moving to a village playground that is a total disaster, needs to be redone. And the DPW person being there said, why can't we put these projects together, which made all kinds of sense. From that came the fire department across the road. We're looking at security cameras. We're talking about this huge project. And they have come up, as you can see in that one flyer, with their fundraising goal of $100,000. And I'm convinced they're going to make it because they have a lot of people involved, a lot of excitement coming about as they've gone with social media to get this off the ground. And I'm thinking that's some of the challenges, you wanted us to just mention quickly. Challenges were rejection by the first group. A blessing in disguise and probably one of the best things that could have happened to us because it'll open the doors to other discussions we might not have had. So with that quick overview, I will leave it open to any questions that people might have.
Thank you for sharing, Linda, and for the enthusiasm. I think is really, really awesome. What's the population in Dolgeville?
It's 2,200 people. I should have mentioned that. And there's not a single stoplight or a blinking light in this town. So, and the crosswalks that are beautiful, you don't want to get caught in because nobody knows what you do with those if you're driving a vehicle. So there's a lot to be done in this town with the physical activity piece of it. But very small community, but when you see a community like this that has these kind of people around the table, they can do anything. And I'm convinced they're going to. And we're going to certainly be part of that and watch it happen.
I'm convinced too, Linda.
What a great note to end on, and I hate to end this because it really is very exciting, but our time is coming to a close here. So I'm going to step out of these slides here and just show you where you can find this and other webinars within the Campus County Connection webinar series. So what you see up right now is if you're a staff member either of an extension office or here in extension on campus, if you go to the staff site, which is just staff.cce.cornell.edu, and then that's our staff site for cooperative extension. Under units, organizational development and accountability is where all of our program development and Campus County Connection stuff is. This is a website where you can find anything from myself or Sarah Dayton, Eduardo Gonzalez, or Kim Fleming. The Campus County Connection link is in the top box in the toolbox, and you'll see all of our webinars that from the Campus County Connection webinar series are here, and the recordings are here as well. So they're there in and forevermore, or at least until we until we really change things up. So you'll be able to find, in the next couple of days, I'll post the webinar recording from today there. I also want to point out, and Rebecca, if you want to just mention anything about your research that could be found here. So this is the link that was part of the announcement of today's webinar.
Yeah, that's great. So I think the most important thing for this group is under research projects. You can find out more about the Heart Club project and other projects that have components. So for example, under research projects, there is a link for the Strong Hearts for Montana, which has a Heart Club. It's the very top, second to the top link. There is also a Heart Club component of that project, but yeah, I think that those would be the most interesting, and I think you'll see commonly throughout that almost all of these projects have some kind of extension partnership, community partnership. Not all, but almost all of them do, and people could follow up. And I'm happy to take more questions by email or whatever if people have questions about, and we could route them, Linda, to you if people have questions specifically for you and your work, but happy to provide resources. And I know we're out of time, but we can also, the future directions, do you want me to mention this at all, or do we have to hang up?
I think we need to wrap up.
Okay.
But just one question is, if somebody that's on wants to follow up and learn more about how they could be involved, is it too soon? Should they just sort of follow your research? How would an educator that was really interested in making something like this happen in their community, how could they stay in touch? Or
I think the best thing to do would be to send us an email and let us know that they were on the webinar and they're interested in, the Heart Club work in general. The long-term vision is to create something so that people can do this on their own in their community, and we do hope to have a renewal of this project. So I think just getting in touch, and then we can keep a list of people who are interested.
And your email? I'm realizing I don't
have it on here. So it's R as in Rebecca, S as in Sam, 946 @cornell.edu. And I'm easily found. I think it's on the home page of the website too. So RS946.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you guys very much for joining us. Thank you, Linda, for joining us remotely. And thanks for everybody for participating today.
Yeah, huge thanks, Linda. Thank you so much.
Linda, and thank you, Celeste, as well.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Have a great day, everybody.